Hey, 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 welcome back to the House Husband Diaries. I am your host, as always, Carter C. And today we are talking about Roger Federer as the GOAT, the greatest of all time in men's tennis. This video series, I've got videos talking about the case for and against Roger Federer for greatest of all time, Rafael Nadal for greatest of all time, Novak Djokovic, yeah. So those are the three that right now are pretty much the undisputed kings of men's tennis historically. You've got Pete Sampras, Jimmy Connors, Yvonne Lendl, Bjorn Borg. Maybe I'm missing a couple other off the top of my head for historical greats. I know there's Roy Emerson and Rod Laver, but really when you look at the historical numbers right now, you've got Roger, Rafa, and Novak in the Grand Slams, winning percentages, all those things. So this video is going to be my fors and against for Roger Federer. And yeah, without further ado, we'll get started. Roger Federer has the most Grand Slam titles of any history of any men's tennis player in the history of tennis. So the old record was 14. Pete Sampras. Before that, it was 11, and he has 20. So he is far and away surpassed the old historical record and highs. And since then, he's paved the way for Rafa Nadal with 19 and Novak Djokovic with 16. Reason number two, he has the most weeks as the number one player in the world all time. 310 weeks at number one, which is 24 weeks longer than Pete Sampras, who's number two, and then another 11 weeks to Novak Djokovic after that. So I mean, he's every bit of 6 months. He spent 6 months longer than anyone else at the top spot in men's tennis as a ranking. So you got the most Grand Slams. You got the most weeks at number one. And then my third reason is he's second in wins, and he's second in matches played all time. And he's not going to retire this year. So somewhere in the fall, maybe U.S. Open, maybe even before U.S. Open, probably around the U.S. Open, maybe, depending on if he plays clay or not. He's on pace if he doesn't get injured and he has a similar year, even if he drops down a little bit from his winning percentage last year or this past year in 2019. He's almost guaranteed to pass Jimmy Connors for matches played and matches won. So that would leave him with the most wins ever, most weeks at number one ever, most Grand Slams ever, and he would be second to Jimmy Connors in total titles, which at his rate will probably take him, if he continues to play, into a good 2021 as well. He'll need 2 years to get those 6 titles. I don't believe he can pull 6 titles and tie Jimmy Connors. He'll need a 7th title to get that record as well. And I just don't think he's winning 7 titles next year or in 2020. So the other thing I'll say is my fourth reason is that he has sustained a level of greatness that is unmatched. It's unsurpassed in how good he's been for how long. He has the most weeks in the top 10, the most weeks in the top 5, most weeks in top 4, most weeks in top 3. As I said in the Rafael Nadal video, he's actually second to Nadal in most weeks in the top 2, but he's far and away the leader in time spent in the number 1 spot. So, Rafa's got him on top 2, but number 1, top 3, top 4, top 5, and top 10 right now. Rogers, he's got that, and he's number 3 right now, so he's looking to extend all of that. 3 down, 3 to 10, just extend his leads in those. I don't know that he'll ever get back to number 1. I don't know that he needs to. He's probably not going to beat Rafa and Novak for any sustained period of time and get back into the top two with those guys, and then with the young bucks coming up. But those records that he has and the weeks that he's achieved in that, it's really unsurpassed at this point, and really impressive. And then the last thing I'll say for why Roger Federer is the greatest men's tennis player of all time, is his wins against top 10. I mean, he hasn't just won a bunch of cupcake matches. He has the most wins all time against top 10 competition. So he's played and beaten the best for a long time. So I got 4 reasons. Those are 5 reasons, 5.5 reasons for Roger Federer being the GOAT. And but there's 4 against him. There's 4 reasons I have against him. And really, I think what's interesting about these debates and why I decided to do these videos, one, I enjoy tennis, but 2, you've got a couple of guys in today's day and age that are playing great tennis for ages that tennis players in history used not to play. They weren't competitive in their mid to late 30s. I mean, Jimmy Connors played till he was like 42 or 43. But other than that, I mean, guys were retiring in their late 20s, early 30s, and there was a decline. And these guys have just really brought forward. I don't know, what it is, but maybe it's the water in Europe, right? Where are American tennis players at? But anywho, you've got really 3 guys that have an argument for greatest of all time that are current. And I think it's really fascinating because they all have blemishes. And they're not just airtight cases, like, and I mentioned in the Rafa Nadal video, like Tiger Woods. I mean, it's pretty airtight. Some people can argue Jack Nicklaus because he still has the most Grand Slam titles or majors. But everything else, Tiger just blows him away. And when you look at a career, Tiger's still playing. He still has a chance to get 1 or 2 more majors. I doubt he'll get 3 and catch Jack, but maybe that'll be another video. So 4 reasons against Roger Federer, 4 arguments for Roger not being the GOAT is number 1, his head-to-head, as I mentioned in the video for Rafa Nadal. In his case, Roger Federer's head-to-head battles and his match record against Rafa Nadal is terrible. It's 16 wins and 24 losses. He only wins 40% of the matches he plays against Rafa Nadal. And it's been that way. He lost his first match against Rafa, won his second one, and then lost like 4 or 5 in a row. When Rafa was a teenager in like 20, 21, and Roger was, in his late 20s, in the prime of his career, and he was losing to Rafa. Rafa just had his number. So when you look at the big 3, Roger, Rafa, and Novak, they're really competitive, their matches, except for the Rafa-Roger head-to-head matchup. It's just not even close. And I think it's really hard to say that you're the greatest of all time when you couldn't beat your biggest rival but 40% of the time. Like, all those other numbers kind of go out the window when you have that. It's not even close. It's not like 1 or 2 matches, and I'll say that because that's how it is. My next point is Roger also is losing in his head-to-head matchup with Djokovic. So is his second biggest rival in this time period, the second top player. He also loses his head-to-head. So how can you be the greatest player in the history of your sport if you have a losing record against your 2 biggest rivals? I mean, Michael Jordan doesn't have a losing record against Karl Malone or anybody else that I know of. He's pretty much a stud. That's why Michael Jordan's the best. LeBron James loses a lot of finals. Yeah, he's won some, but he had to go make a super team. Like all these other guys, like, you can't be the best if you can't beat the best. And Roger's record, it lacks in those 2 areas. Those are the biggest, kind of the biggest blemishes. Everything else looks great. And then you look at his personal head-to-head matchups with the 2 best players other than himself during his era, and he loses to both of them. And it's just, that's a hard one to swallow. So the third reason, or the third argument against Roger being number one is his age, or I should say, conversely, the age of his two biggest competitors in Rafa and Novak, and that they're 5 and 6 years younger, respectively. So all of these records that Roger holds and that he's setting and will set next year, I mean, he's got guys that are much younger than him that are gunning, that are close. I mean, Rafa's only one major away. Djokovic is 4 majors away. You know, these guys are on Roger's heels. They're beating him in winning percentage. You know, they've got some years that they need to play great tennis. But, you know, Roger's getting to the end of his career. He had a great year in 2019, but he's staring at 40. And it's really hard for me to believe with the young guys coming up, the Tsitsipas and Zverev and Medvedev and all those guys. I mean, they're coming up and they're just going to get better. Berrettini. So you know, that's something that Rogers he's at the pinnacle now, and he's got a really good case. But there's some big holes here that, you know, I mean, who knows? Maybe he wins. He has like a throwback year in 2020 and wins another major or two. And pushes some of those numbers up to make it, you know, really airtight. Wins a couple matches against Djokovic, evens that series. Wins a couple against Rafa, makes that look a little more equitable. And who knows? And then the fourth thing I'll say, argument against, you know, Roger, is that of his 103 titles, which is second only to Jimmy Connor's 109, 25 of those titles are ATP 250 events, like the small ones, you know, like one step above a challenger. Rafa and Novak have 9 of those titles. So 16 more titles in the low event. So when you look at total number of titles, if you were to say, okay, Rafa Nadal has 84 total titles, well, give him 16 more. If he plays a bunch of ATP 250 events, he's probably going to win them, because the top 10 players, typically there may be one top 10 player in each one of those events. It's typically not more than that, and so he would probably be it. I mean, he could win 16 more of those, he'd have 100 titles. He could probably win 16 ATP 250 events next year, equal Roger Federer's 25, and then only be 3 titles away. And I mean, you know, I'm sure he'd play some Masters and whatever. Maybe he'd have 103 titles next year. You know, Djokovic, same thing. He's 6 years behind. He could play a lot of ATP 250 events and get his titles up. I'm sure get some easy wins over some lower competition. It wouldn't be the money, it wouldn't be the cachet, but in terms of total titles, you know, the total, and people aren't going to dig too deeply. They're going to look at most Grand Slams, and they're going to look at the number overall of titles, and they're not going to dig to the 250 level. But in doing this research, and I was interested in just comparing them, because it's interesting for me to have these discussions in my own mind, and now I'm sharing them with you guys. But you know, that's a big leap in kind of, you know, just winning bad tournaments. And I think most of those were his home tournament that didn't become a 500 event until like this year or last year. So I would say probably 9 or 10 of those. I didn't do the deep research on that, so there might be a reason, but it is what it is. And you know, it's not the it just adds a little crease in the airtight case. So what does Roger need to do in 2020 and beyond to shore up his case for greatest tennis player of all time, greatest men's tennis player of all time? Well, first of all, he needs Rafa to stop winning, is what he needs. I mean, especially Grand Slams, right? Rafa is undefeated in French Open finals. He's 12-0, 12 for 12. And unless Rafa is hurt or has something happen come the end of May, beginning of June of 2020, Rafa's going to get 20. He's going to tie Roger. So in order for Roger to hold on to his argument, or at least one of his main arguments for being the greatest of all time, he really needs Rafa to stop winning. The second thing he needs to do, or could do, to really bolster his case is he could win the French Open. He's only won one, and he would be the first person, as long as Rafa doesn't win the Australian Open in January, February. If he could win the French Open, he would be the first person to win the career Grand Slam twice, which is all four majors, all 4 Grand Slams, 2 times each. Nobody's done it twice. Only a few people have done it once. And, Rafa has a chance in next month, and Federer has a chance when they go to Paris. So the third thing that he could do is even his head-to-head matchup with Djokovic. He's down to 26-28, and he really, it would help to play Novak twice and beat him twice and even it up would really help his case for the greatest of all time, or just shore it up. I mean, that's not going to be a deal breaker necessarily, but it is something. He's not going to even his head to head with Rafa. There's no way he's going to beat Rafa, 8 times in a row, and they're only going to play 8 more times. It's just not going to happen. So but it hurts to say he has a losing record against his 2 biggest rivals. If he could have a losing record to Rafa and even with Djokovic, then that's a little bit easier of an argument to say he's the greatest of all time. And then the last thing is I would say he does need to close the gap, his head-to-head gap with Rafa. I mean, it really hurts to say that you're not even close to your biggest competitor, and it's not just on clay. It's other surfaces too. So there you have it. That's 5 reasons why Roger Federer is the greatest men's tennis player of all time. 4 reasons or arguments that he's not, and 4 reasons or 4 opportunities that Roger has in 2020 and beyond to really shore up his case for the greatest men's tennis player of all time. Thanks for watching. Let me know if you like sports videos and the research that I do. If you'd rather hear something else not sports related, let me know in the comments below. If you have other sports that you'd like me to talk about, basketball, football, I love getting into statistics. Any questions you have, you just let me know. I'll dig into it and put a video out for you. Thanks again for watching. It's Carter C., House Husband Diaries. Taking care of the pup.